BBC Scotland ex-flight attendant Pat Kerr has faced many challenges in the past 25 years, but now takes on her biggest battle yet.
Early morning in rural Bangladesh. 3 hours drive from Dhaka, the world's busiest capital. A village set in a tranquil forest is home to 600 destitute mothers and children. 25 years ago, BBC Scotland told the story of the woman who made it all happen. Pat Kerr, once a flight attendant with British Airways, rehearses a speech in Bengali for the Bangladeshi Prime Minister. It's critical because she's trying to save the village she helped create.
We bought 13 acres of land, and it turned out that the papers for 9 of those acres were forged.
Pat sacrificed her glamorous job with BA to administer the daily running of the project, living rough in jungle Bangladesh, where every day can be a new crisis. Pat's father was a Scottish World War II flying ace, and she has inherited his fighting genes. But now she faces her biggest battle yet. Bangladesh is the most overpopulated country in the world. 158 million packed into an area half the size of Britain. 40% is underwater. Floods kill thousands and make millions homeless every year. Desperate people flee to Dhaka, home to 16 million, Earth's most teeming city. Many cling to life without electricity, food or water. One quarter of all children under 5 die. 183,000 every year. Children struggle in big families or as street kids. Every day, a fight to stay alive. But thousands of children have been saved over the past 20 years because the village, known locally as Shishu Polli Plus, is there for them and destitute single mothers. They get aid and help for when they leave in the future.
These ladies are the mothers of the children here, and they weren't managing outside, and the babies, they couldn't look after them, maybe living in the street or in the slums. Or sometimes the babies have a medical problem that they can't afford to address. And so they live here for a while, and they learn numeracy and literacy and learn skills, and also they're safe, a safe place for a while. It's about 120 mothers, because the mothers also work here in the different sections. They don't work in childcare in the first year because we do training and stuff the first year, and they'll work in paper making or something. So they're paid a very small salary, but also every month we save some money for them. So they get everything like saris, blouses, soap, everything, food, and then they're not allowed to touch the savings till they leave. So everybody leaves with a capital sum. Usually if they stayed here 5 years, usually like 20,000 taka or 25, enough to buy a sewing machine or a small piece of piece of land or do some agriculture. So, and then, oh, Sonia, oh, Kiko.
Although Pat enjoys life in the village, she always seeks improvements and challenges.
But there's a big challenge. I mean, ultimately, obviously, the whole idea is to make people able to earn enough and to know how to care for their children and to live in the society independently, bring the children up, going to school, doing all the things that children should have.
Pat and her team implemented fresh ideas, like schooling for families whose children live in outlying villages, as well as the residents. Educating the local community is a top priority. Jobs are hard to find in Bangladesh, especially for slum dwellers. Enterprising residents filter through rubbish but will never escape the poverty trap. Pat crusades to educate destitute women in Dhaka slums. It's impossible to house every street child, but a new drop-in centre is popular, giving them a welcome break.
And it'll be big enough for about 30 or 40 children at any one time, but as it's a drop-in centre, children will be coming and going. So, you know, you might have like 100 children in a day, or you might not have very many in a day, but you'll have children. The plan is it's just like an open, safe place for people to come. We're going to have a television, because, you know, that's something that we've found we've used in other areas, and people love television. So children who might not come otherwise would come, and then we're going to do our best.
Even when children leave the village, help continues. Another priority is scholarships into further education. Dulal and Mito became sporting champions, new lives for the emaciated waifs Pat met over 20 years ago.
Dulal, you're teaching sports and gym in the senior school?
Senior building, yeah.
And you're teaching?
I'm teaching in junior building.
In the junior building.
The same school.
It's nice.
Very nice to we are working together.
And
we are growing up together and working also together.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are in this position because of you.
So this is your senior school building?
Yes, right.
This is the office in the senior school. Roughly how many children are there in the senior school?
Around 600 maybe.
Oh, a lot.
Let's introduce our head of school.
Hello, I'm Fausia.
Very nice to meet you.
You really did a brilliant job.
The best thing we did was we got them scholarships, didn't we, to the sports school, which made a huge difference.
She's very caring on us.
Oh, that's important.
So still.
Also important.
Yeah, you really built them up well. They're really good people.
Good, good. Well, thank you very much. It's very nice to meet you. Thank you for showing us your school.
Shefali was abandoned with her brother and sister when she was 10. She became a long-haul flight attendant with BA. Shiraz was one of the many disabled people rescued. He became the village caretaker. Latifa was abandoned at 18 months. And when she reached 18, got a placement in a special school for the deaf in Dhaka. Razal arrived when he was 7 and left as a trained mechanic and refrigeration engineer, now making a good living. Razia was a street kid and is now a trained nurse. The list goes on. 24 years ago, mischievous Pradeep was featured. He left the village, got married, and became a father. He returned to the village to train as an administrator, once Pat decides to retire.
His mother abandoned him when he was very young, I think maybe less than 6, around 6. And he lived with us, and, you know, he did quite well. He was very smart. He did really well in school. When he was about 11, he looked for her again, and he found her. And really, she kind of abandoned him a second time. You have far less abandoned children here these days, mostly the children with their mothers.
Yes, it was when I was 11.
Is it from your file?
Yes, I got them from my file.
We've also decided over the years, and in consultation with the trustees, they've agreed that we've got now a positive employment policy of trying to recruit back older boys and girls that have done well outside. I think it would be really, you know, it's wrong to keep someone here and then they just live here. But if people have gone outside and made, you know, spent 10 years and developed their careers and made a good life for themselves, and sometimes they're interested in coming back to work for us. So her executive assistant is Pradeep. And our real hope obviously for the longer term is that we can start having a system in place where ex-boys and girls actually run the project. That's what we're working towards. And I think that gives us a long-term sustainability which would otherwise be very hard to achieve. Approved. Okay. Good. So what are we purchasing here?
Pat wanted the village to be self-sufficient.
Oh, how fascinating.
Over time, they created a plentiful fish farm and grow their own crops on many plots. The village has a big population, so they need to keep coming up with money-making ideas. One clever idea is selling cards made by the single mothers and women in the community through a local hotel chain and overseas, including the UK.
We will get all your cards. Not only that, we will give you a press release, a big press release. We are tagging with Shishu Polli Plus. I send your card all the media house and mention that this is from Shishu Polli Plus.
Brilliant.
We already tagged with Shishu Polli Plus.
Villagers also benefit from healthcare, with surprising results.
Head lice and scabies are pretty endemic in Bangladesh, so we never completely get rid of them. But every 3 months we have a day where we try and treat everybody, because the other thing is there's no point if you don't treat everybody or it'll just get passed on again.
When I was a little boy here, I used to have scabies all my body. And I can still remember when I was 6 or 7 years old, that nurses used to paint as escabiole, a cream that time available, with a painting brush. And we all were standing on the sun and we were painted with the scabiole. Nowadays we are doing really well, that very few cases we get with scabies, but mostly we don't give opportunity to come it back. So it's the part of our regular work here, and we make sure that we do it regularly.
Many residents on the scholarship initiative found work in the medical profession.
My name is Abul Kalam, and I am working in this hospital as an anesthesia technologist in the cardiac operation theatre.
My name is Rina Akhtar. I work as an assistant physiotherapist.
I am Halim Akhtar. I am studying Diploma in Nursing Science and Midwifery. I come from Shishu Polli Plus, Sripur, Gazipur.
My name is Stephanie. Now I am a physiotherapy assistant.
My organization is very good. They support me a lot. They fulfill all of my demand when I asked them. I am very pleased with my organization.
The scholarship program is successful, but higher education doesn't suit everyone. So Pat trains them for skilled jobs to help their financial future.
The focus with the women has to be on giving them skills that they can use when they leave. And sometimes those skills aren't necessarily those that would generate an income whilst they're here. But what is important is that they have something that can support their family when they're not here.
So Pat built relationships with local employers, especially in the garment trade.
Thank you. We have a problem placing them in jobs where they can earn enough to look after their families independently. So if we trained people up, would you have vacancies? I mean, would you employ them or what?
Definitely. Here we are running a garments. We do need the workers.
Right.
So if you supply or provide the skill operator by training them, or we will give the first priority to get the people in the factory as a job problem.
But we mean, will this help them to get higher salary than as a person?
It depends on his or her performance.
Okay. So because we're really keen to do some partnerships where we can train women up in the skills you need.
After the collapse of a garment factory in April 2013 killed 1,100 people, Pat took in some of the women who had become destitute. Pat's hard work pays back in different ways. Mina was abandoned at birth. Pat got her work in a factory. Now she's getting married. So Pat happily becomes mother of the bride.
She's been outside and independent for 5 years. And she's obviously thought of very highly in the factory because the factory owner and a number of the staff have come and joined us today. In the Bangladeshi, the Muslim wedding ceremony, all the papers are kind of prepared and separately and then just brought to her to sign. And then the mullah make prayers and asks her whether she understands and whether she agrees. And so now she's officially married.
She also made a deal with a hotel to train women as chambermaids.
Pillow making, bed making.
So for, these women, it's a huge opportunity. We have 14 on the course, this first course, and 8 are here today. And all of them have, really fairly tragic stories. 2 of them in particular, I think Ruma and Rakina, both lost their husbands and had a fairly hard time before that. One of them, I think Ruma's husband, actually died before her child was born. And in Bangladesh, when you get married, you actually move to your husband's village or home or whatever. And so, but they've actually been left completely destitute and had nowhere to go and nothing to do. So if out of this, they come, well trained with a little bit of English. And the other thing is, with a bit of income generating potential, we found we're able to take some mothers back to villages they came from, and they're viewed completely differently by the local population because they're actually able to bring in some income, they have some numeracy and literacy. And whilst these days we try, most of the work you try and do is in the community, so you actually don't move someone out of their community. It's considered the wrong thing to do. But actually for a lot of these women, it's actually quite good to get them out of a very perilous situation for a while. And then when they move back, they're almost treated in a different way. Whereas actually gaining that respect on a daily basis would have been much harder. So it's very exciting.
Leaving village life can be daunting, so Pat created the halfway house.
It's a home for most of our mothers with their children spend some time here before they leave because they're used to having their food cooked. So they learn to go marketing again, they learn to cook in a village oven and generally how to look after their children in a village environment.
There is a successful support system for former residents, but sometimes they don't ask for help in time.
Nassima was an older girl with us, got married 4 years ago, and in our system, after the marriage has been successful for a year and then we review it 6 months later and then we do some follow-up with some checks. And she had a baby, a little girl, Tumar Bacha Namki? No. 2 years ago. The baby's with the grandmother at the moment, but someone from here went to see her a month ago and 6 weeks ago. She was already sick. That hasn't happened overnight. She's refusing medicine, she's refusing hospital, she's refusing food. I do more kind of horrible, nasty things than I do nice things because, that's how you keep things under control. Try and make her eat. Nassima, listen, Mahbooba, my Bangla's not good. If she stays here, she has to do everything you tell her to do. She has to eat. And if she doesn't, she'll have to go to hospital. She should go to hospital anyway, but she's 30 years old and she's refusing, so we have no right to make her go to hospital. She said to her that if she wasn't going to eat, she couldn't stay, because if she wasn't going to eat, she was going to die. I don't know. Get her husband to talk to her, Eustace. Well, he looks fit enough. So finally we did get her to eat. And she rallied a bit that day and the next day, and then she agreed to go to hospital, and we took her to hospital in Dhaka. And she was in a general hospital, and then she was transferred to the TB hospital, and she very sadly died that day. She was in the final stages of TB. And TB is not only curable, it's curable free in Bangladesh. So what have we done wrong for Nassima that she didn't show either the character or the initiative, or why didn't she get help earlier? Why didn't her husband, who was very fat and healthy, thank you very much, get help for her earlier? I mean, but that's something I can't control. This building was funded by UNICEF through the British Airways Change for Good programme, and we started building it about 4 years ago, and its purpose is to give some children here who are now adults with profound psychological disabilities, challenges, a long-term home, because there's no other long-term care available, but also to really develop the psychological and counselling support, because we haven't done as much of that as we should in the past. And actually it's also not been very accessible in Bangladesh. It's only starting to become accessible. At the moment there are about 8 people resident here. We also have, there's a lot of stigma against psychiatric illness and psychological issues in Bangladesh. So we've also put offices for staff in here, and we've put our meeting room in here so that people have to come and go from this building. It's not like an ostracised separate building. There's lots of coming and going. And when visitors stay, we have accommodation for them here. And we're doing a lot of work with Kerr who's bringing with counselling, and Dhaka University Department of Clinical Psychology, to see if we can, everyone here that's ever been tested has been abused, so they need more support we can give. We do find that a lot of people, when they leave, don't function as well as they should, and we think part of that is because we haven't given them the skills, psychologically, the strength.
In 1989, President Ershad performed the opening ceremony, then promised electricity and a road to improve village life. This made a big difference to the village and the surrounding area.
The President a road off the main road and electricity, so our particular area slowly. I mean, also in over 20 years you would expect any area to change quite a lot, but now it sort of accelerated the change, and now it's changed significantly, and there's a lot more industry, shops, communities, new schools, a lot more people live in the area. Certainly we kick-started it, but also along this main trunk road a lot more companies have developed, a lot more factories, and there's been a lot of development also along this road. So this kind of rural, idyll that we'd originally built in has become quite a commercial hub. But that's actually a really good thing, because partnerships with all these industries will help us find better employment and better training and better opportunities for the mothers and the girls.
The village is a stunning success, but back to the 80s, we can see the huge effort that made it possible. Pat Kerr was a purser on long-haul BA flights. But everything changed after she became a regular on the London to Dhaka route. Bored at her hotel on 3-day stopovers, she went exploring and discovered a Canadian charity running an overcrowded, run-down orphanage. She volunteered to help and became a regular. The children's welcomes were always enthusiastic. Pat constantly hearing, "Pat Mummy," still her nickname today. Pat didn't see her volunteering as just a welcome break from flying, filled with fun and games.
The girl, she's quite a young girl. Her husband was killed in a car accident. She has a job, and she's going to lose the job if she doesn't. She can't keep a baby on the job, and she hasn't got much milk. If she had a lot of breast milk and the baby was doing well, then we'd try and find a way of leaving the baby with her. But she has very little milk, and the baby's not doing very well.
It's her only child, is it?
Yeah.
She's very young herself. She looks scarcely more than a girl herself.
She thinks she's about 15. She's not sure how old she is. She either signs or puts her thumbprint on 3 pieces of paper. One about medical care, one to confirm that we'll bring it up in its religion, and another one to give details of why the baby's admitted and why she can't have it. It's the 25th.
A thumbprint was all it took for this woman to give custody of her baby to the orphanage and get medical care. It was a heartbreaking decision. Pat had found her life's mission and had the character to see it through. But her late father, Scottish World War II RAF hero, Wing Commander Harry Kerr, was worried about her health.
It has endangered her health. She has had one quite serious illness through tropical diseases, and it certainly gives me concern, but I do object to the health side. And purely on the health side, I really wish to hell she wasn't doing what she's doing now, if you want an honest opinion. But but on the other hand, I hasten to add, I'm very proud of what she's doing. I'm very proud of the way she's handling it. But as a selfish parent, I'd rather it was someone else.
She inspired BA crew and executives to join in.
£200,000 so far.
Given a contribution by British Airways of £1 for every 3 you raise, £18,000.
BA's chairman at the time, Lord King, was persuaded by TV presenter Desmond Wilcox to double BA's generosity.
Supposing she came to you and said, why don't you make it £2 for every £3 we raise, do you think that the board of British Airways would go with you towards that gesture?
If the case was argued, yes. Well, I wouldn't want to go on record about the board. I'd probably say that it would be all right.
Pat rallied crews to dig ditches and repair equipment in the stopover time. Some sacrificed their Christmas holidays to help the children. Then, panic. Fundraising became even more critical. They were about to be evicted. They had to start searching for a new home.
It's here in Dhaka, where homelessness is widespread, where hunger is the norm, and where children become the first victims of this battlefield for human survival, that one can see the scale of the problem, the reason the orphanage is always full to overflowing. But the children don't have to be cared for in the middle of the battlefield itself. 37 miles outside the city, in the lush countryside, the British Airways team and the orphanage workers have found a site on which they could build a home for 600 children. It could be the answer to all their dreams. It's 13 acres, which in a country where land is so scarce is a magnificent estate. Here the children could grow up in a rural setting, better protected from the risk of disease and infection, better equipped to earn a living later in life.
Meanwhile, Pat sought partnerships with others, like Save the Children.
At 13 months, to have already had TB, to have a cataract, to have had cholera, I think she probably will get well, because she must be a real fighter, you know. To pull through all that. I think this is one that we'll have to keep visiting and see how she does, because imagine being that age and already having to deal with all that.
You have a close working relationship at the orphanage with this Save the Children unit?
Yes, yes, because this is a nutrition unit. It's a hospital rather than a children's home. So if they have children abandoned here, they've brought them to us. We go about, I should think at the moment, 4 or 5 children that have come from here. And if we have a child brought, obviously in this state, we're a children's home, we wouldn't try and look after it. We'd bring it here. And we have Save the Children, and we have a very good relationship with them here. So let's keep our fingers crossed, eh? Oh, sorry, darling, okay. I think we're very lucky, you know, to work in a children's home. At least the children we get, mostly they've been through this possibly, but at least they're fairly well and happy. I think the people who work in places like this, it must be heartrending, really.
Yes. Yes.
We're very lucky that we mostly see them when they're getting better. And like every other child, I mean, even the children you see at our place, and just even needing something like a cuddle, you know. She was lying there crying. It's just not enough hands to go around.
Today, Shah Alam is doing well back home with the grandparents.
On a barren jungle plot in Sripur, far from crowded, polluted Dhaka, the new village took shape. 100% dedication and willpower finally paid off, and everyone wanted to be part of it. Pat's next challenge was huge, moving 600 children from the shanty orphanage to their new home. Many were emotionally disturbed.
Commuting 3 hours each day was difficult, but what was much worse was that when it came to the crunch, the children felt very unsettled by the move.
That changed on official opening day. BA's Lord King and President Ershad were guests of honour. They and the VIPs came by helicopter because the only road to the village was a dirt track. During the President's speech, Pat was surprised by a dramatic announcement.
600 children living here without electricity is not known to me. And this place is not connected by any road. It is also news to me. Today, as one of you, may I contribute to the institution so that it grows up in future. Electricity connection and a road from my side.
It was everyone's commitment that helped Pat dedicate her life to the project. But she had her own private life too. In 1999, she married businessman Derek Palmer. Naturally, the wedding took place at the children's village.
I, Derek, take you, Pat, to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse,
for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part, according to God's holy law, and this is my solemn vow.
I therefore proclaim that they are husband and wife.
Pat's dedication to the village meant that they would be separated a lot, but Derek was supportive.
For Pat to do this 20 years ago, you know, not as a do-gooder, not as somebody who was some saint, but simply someone who saw a great need and just couldn't just walk away from it and had to do something about it. And having done something about it, had to continue to look after it. And it grew and grew. And having grown, it wasn't something she could then turn her back on, ever. And in my books, in my eyes, she's a heroine. She would see it simply as somebody getting on with a job that has to be done and helping people in the process.
Pat refuses to accept she's heroic. But before the project began, what kind of life did she see for herself?
I think that I have one life and I want to live it to the full and as best I can, and if I can help a few people along the way, so much the better. That's all really.
The eve of the village's 20th anniversary, Pat used it as an excuse for a thorough tidy-up.
20 years is just an opportunity to give people to celebrate, and people love that here. Like all the staff of the women have actually bought themselves new saris, and everyone's really thrown themselves into it. And it's also given us an opportunity to clean the roofs and to do all the things that, you know, like I keep trying to get people to do on a daily basis and they won't do. But it's a lot of work putting a celebration like this together. There'll probably be 1,200 people.
20 years of history. 20 years, the seed becomes a tree now. And 20 years of love you've given me.
Rehearsals were underway for a well-deserved celebration.
20 years, a dream becomes reality.
As the sun set that night, no one slept much, all excited by the big occasion. Guests from all over the world, including original BA staff, trustees, ex-residents and politicians, arrived on rickshaws and buses. The real VIP was Pat's close friend and co-administrator, Trisha Sylvester, with her 2 adopted daughters.
Pat's been the one at the sharp end, really. Living in rural Bangladesh is very hard. The people are lovely, but it's a hard life, especially when you're married, and she's been here now for 4 years as a married person. And the difference that she has made has just been outstanding, really. I think a lot of people, you wake up in the morning and you're not afraid, are you? There's no reason to be afraid. You might be having a difficult day, but whereas here and in lots of places over the world, people wake up and they are not safe physically or emotionally safe. And so we give them that, and then we try and move them towards independence.
The daily grind many Bangladeshis endure was forgotten. Children and guests enjoyed the carnival, and so did Pat. After 20 years of dedication, determination, endless fundraising, inner strength and self-motivation, she created a safe haven for 600 destitute mothers and children.
Now with your love and help, our life seems like a breeze. Giving your love to me, I still wish you. 20 years of sweet history.
There were speeches from key supporters, like the British High Commissioner.
You today to celebrate 2 decades of achievement by this amazing organisation, and to see among you many who know this place well and who've been touched by its work.
And former President Ershad returned to give praise.
Dad has done a great job. Dad, thank you very much for looking after our children and mothers.
All I had a part in building what you see around me. Giving your love to me. Children that come and grown up and learn the things they need. Yeah. Giving your love to me.
20 years earlier, top Edinburgh restaurateur Tommy Mia launched a cookbook, held events and catered for guests at the gala opening.
Yeah, very nice and mild.
He returned, his food adding to the celebrations. The event was an outstanding success, although Pat, as always, was level-headed.
You worry every day. I mean, there's hundreds of people here, and it's not the sort of thing where you're ever in a position where you think, oh yeah, this is going fine.
How prophetic these words would become. 3 years later, disaster.
What happened was we bought it in, I think, July 86, and the government accepted all the papers. They were mutated, which is a Bangladeshi process where they go into the land registry. We paid land tax on them, and we started building the project, and we had some minor boundary disputes with local people, which you always do when you move into, you know, but nothing about the overall land, no issue whatsoever. We received a visit and some paperwork from the local land office to say that they had determined that some of the papers on which our ownership was based were forged. They stopped taking tax from us and said that the land is actually forestry land and did not belong to the person who we bought it from. We bought about 13 acres of land, and it turned out that the papers for 9 of those acres were forged. The person who sold us the land was a local person. He went to jail. He was prosecuted by the government for fraud, and he went to jail for some time, and he still lives locally.
Ironically, buying land on high ground safe from floods and toxic Dhaka caused serious problems. But when the land was purchased, Pat saw things differently.
It's a high piece of land. I mean, in lots of ways, it's an inaccessible. You know, there are lots of criticisms of the piece of land we bought, but it is very high, and it was bought primarily with that in mind. Construction was slowed up because the roads were so bad. It was certainly going to be way above flood levels, which is good.
And the village's success made the land valuable to property developers.
Well, potentially there could be some development in this area. I mean, they've talked about having an airport in this area, which they're now not going to do, but they also talked about having a wildlife park in this area, and presumably the land could be annexed by the government. It does belong to them, and if they needed it for something, you know, so presumably we could lose our project.
Some or all of the village could be bulldozed, which happens often on occupied government land. It was a nightmare. The children and mothers could be homeless. The halfway house, crucial to help young mothers cope with life back in the community, could go. Schooling for hundreds of children in a country where no address means no education could end. Training destitute could stop. Vital in a rural Islamic community, a religious centre that caters for a variety of other faiths. Alive for nearly 25 years could be destroyed. Sports facilities where kids learn teamwork skills by qualified professionals could go. Some skills are life-saving. Drown in Bangladesh every year. Because of trusting a fraudulent landowner in 1986, but Pat is a fighter. Fight to the top. The Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has agreed to hear her plea to save the village, and Pat's suggestion that the children and mother should attend is accepted.
We've tried to make it as possible. So 2 of our girls, Soraya and Nurnahar, are actually going to give the address to the Prime Minister, and then one of others and one of our older boys are going to give little case histories, talk about their own lives and how they came to Shishu Polli and what they're doing now. This is like my favorite thing because it's showing the mums actually teaching the children.
Everyone knows what's at stake and get more nervous by the minute.
Adding like the gift, all the gift will go together.
Okay.
Handing over the
So
frame,
you're adding,
welcome.
you're putting two pieces
handing over the
together.
gift, all gift is 6.
Okay, good idea.
Okay, so
That's
that
a
one
really
time.
good idea.
They hope to impress the Prime Minister with a professional display and convince her that the village deserves to survive in Bangladeshi life.
Well, we have 45 minutes with the Prime Minister. We're going to time it today because although everybody's done like one speech is 2 minutes, one activity is 3 minutes, there's always extra time, isn't there? It always takes longer than you think. So we're doing a rehearsal to work out how long it's actually going to take. And also, by trying to do a full rehearsal, you can find out what problems there are and if there are things that you're missing or things you forgot to do. And it looks as if it's just as well we did because it seems a bit chaotic, so.
Pat practiced her speech in Bengali, the local language. She's taken classes since the 80s, but the pressure's on. The single mothers are quick to offer help. Pat, usually cool under fire, feels the stress of transporting 300 children to the Prime Minister's residence in Dhaka.
We've hired, I think, 50 children in a bus, so we must have hired about 6 buses. Then they're going to aim to leave at 6. And then we're bringing all the children to a park near the Prime Minister's residence. And then we'll give them breakfast, because they all get terribly car sick. So if they had breakfast before they went, they'd all be throwing up in the buses. So the idea is to have breakfast when they're down there. And then that's only about a 2 or 3 minute walk from the Gongabon, the Prime Minister's residence. We're hoping to start taking the children into the residence at like 9 or 9:30 because, you know, obviously it's a lot of people to go through security and there's going to be all the singing and dancing costumes and, you know, different bits and pieces. So, so we've tried to allow lots of time for things. It could still go wrong, but there's not much more that we could do now.
Fortunately, husband Derek is on hand to calm nerves.
Anyway, things are hotting up here. We've got the Prime Minister. We're visiting the Prime Minister tomorrow. We had a rehearsal today, which was fairly chaotic, so I think we've got quite a lot of work to do. Plus, I have to learn my speech in Bengali.
Oh, well,
So that's
getting better at Bengali.
It would be just great after all this time, once and for all, to get it sorted out.
Early the next morning, the offices, children's quarters, playing fields and residential buildings are eerily quiet. The village is deserted. Nearly 25 years ago, the village opened, offering sanctuary for 600 destitute mothers and children. Now, there's a deathly silence where usually there's the sound of happy children and busy women.
Akashi Chalet.
6 buses are heading to Dhaka, where the villagers will hear their fate. Pat left the night before to organise the arrival, but there's no sign of the coaches.
Hopeless. I just don't know, hopeless. Who else can we speak to on the bus? Who else is on the buses? The idea was they got here at 7, plenty of time because they get very car sick. Then they sit, have a nice breakfast, which we ordered, which they have. Then they sit in the park, have their breakfast, and they line up. Hi, Mustaq. Sorry to bother you. I think we've just come from Mohakali and the traffic is building up. So you're not going to get here until almost 9 o'clock now. So I think maybe talk to the rest of the committee, but maybe give the children their breakfast on the bus.
The children arrive late.
Okay. Ruby Tartary.
Blissfully unaware of the pressure Pat feels. And don't seem to need motivated for the challenge ahead.
তাড়াতাড়ি লাইনে, হ্যাঁ? সব লাইনে।
It's hard to imagine that these happy, healthy children were once poor street kids. It was the generosity of the British public and the Bangladeshi community that made the village possible in the beginning. Now all that is at grave risk. The first arrivals gather in the park and are lined up in name order to go through security.
Well, the buses have arrived 2 hours later than scheduled. We're supposed to be going into the Prime Minister's office at 9. It's now 9:15. Although we have built in some leeway, our meeting with her isn't until 10:30. But the problem is now the children have to enter by the security list. So at security in the Prime Minister's residence, they'll have a list. So if we organise the children in a line by that list now, they'll go through quite quickly. If we do it any other way, it's going to take forever. Only one bus has not arrived. However, the list is on that bus. They didn't put a copy of the list on each bus. One person kept the list and it's on the last bus. So we're all having to stand here. In the meantime, some of the children decided they're desperate for a pee and they've gone off to a toilet, which seems to be about a mile away. So we're going to have to make sure we get them back. I mean, we'll still be okay for 10:30. We'll still be okay for 10:30. But it's not quite as relaxed and efficient as we had hoped it would be.
Pat's usual cool is about to be tested.
Oh, there's 6 buses. Sorry, 2 buses are missing. They'd said 5 buses, but 4 buses are here, but it turns out actually there are 6 buses, so we're still waiting for 2 buses. I had assumed, wrong to assume anything, but I mean, you saw all the work we did yesterday to organise everything, that they'd have a copy of the list, at least 2 or 3 copies on various buses, but they don't. I do very anxious at this moment. I mean, we actually could conceivably lose the meeting by not being able to get in for 10:30, couldn't we?
Most of the younger children don't know how important their visit is. They see it as a gala occasion, performing for VIPs in a fairy tale venue. Finally, the last bus arrives with the all-important list. The kids line up and filter through security with moments to spare. The anticipation builds and the performers get more nervous. Even Pat is apprehensive.
You know, fingers crossed. I can't say any more than that. Let's hope we're lucky today.
Tension mounts as the staff, children and performers wait for the Prime Minister.
শেখ হাসিনা মহোদয়কে ফুলের তোড়া দিয়ে বরণ করে দিয়েছেন।
Sheikh Hasina, the target of several assassination attempts, has been Prime Minister of Bangladesh since 2009. She's the daughter of the founding father and first ever President of Bangladesh and widow of an eminent nuclear scientist. She also has a good human rights record. The British High Commissioner and Minister of Children's Affairs are there. So is the Prime Minister's granddaughter. Pat sees all of this as a good omen. Older village children tell heartbreaking stories of slum life, never knowing where the next meal was coming from. They compare it to village life, where they're fed, educated and loved. And the children have a huge surprise in store for Pat. They prepared a petition for Pat to get citizenship of Bangladesh.
Then when the children asked about the citizenship, and then they all clapped and stuff, it was a little bit emotional, really. I have to get visas every year and work permits, and obviously if I could come and go at will without having to go through formalities, it would be great. And she actually did turn to me and say, do you want to be a citizen of this country? Which was really sweet.
The informal part of the programme ended with the presentation of a painting, telling the story of Shishu Polli, made by the children. Then, the moment of truth. She is making the most important speech of her life.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everybody in the Prime Minister's household who's helped us today. Everyone's been so helpful with security and everything else. And to the High Commissioner for his very kind words. Thank you all of the performers and the girls giving their speeches and giving their stories. You all did a wonderful job, and I'm very proud. Thank you.
Sheikh Hasina responded in Bengali, and the Bangladeshis in the audience seemed to react positively. The English speakers waited for an accurate translation.
My absolute understanding of what she said was that she will help us, she will look into it, and she will try and get it sorted out. I feel really pleased that we've got this far, but remember, I live a life of constant ups and downs and things going wrong, and working in a rural, third world country. I feel a sense of victory once I have a signed paper on my desk.
After 9 agonising months, the Forestry Commission wrote to Pat. They said they were unable to give them the land as it could set a precedent. Now Pat's best hope is to secure a long-term lease. In the meantime, the Forestry Commission is prepared to be tolerant. So for now, it looks as though 600 destitute mothers and children won't end up back on the street.